I was happy as a fish on a baited hook till your words chased away the dim dog of disapproval. Till your words tap dance on my brown skin like that delicious drip of rain on tin roof, like that subtle hint of lavender in a damp room. Susan, you were buyaka buyaka in my dingy reggae shebeen. Without you, my cuckoo would have been well cooked. Guyana. I remember standing on the veranda each day, fascinated by the tall sunflowers stretching towards the sun, staring at them, bare feet on lacquered wooden floors, or standing under them, tipping my head, arching my spine, to stare up those green bamboo stalks to the yellow crowns. Back then, sunflowers were my happiness. I briefly lost those sunflowers during a period of my childhood when I came to London from Guyana, where they were replaced by thick, bushy, or neatly trimmed, anorexic, squared green hedges. London. The room was small and quaint. Michael Jackson posters lined the walls, and books were scattered carelessly across the bedspread. The white walls beamed Michael Jackson back at me, all different shapes of his faces. In my poor ears still bled from the scars and scabs of the words that cut me raw in the schoolyard playground that day. The big tree by the side of the fence at Sacred Heart Secondary School. The smokers hidden behind the huge trunk puffing. The boys playing football. The girls talking in bunches. And me leaning against that broad trunk, a book pulled to my chest. She stepped into my room, her pleat skirt fluttering with the movement of those pigeon legs. How was school? Her voice is mildly inquiring. All right. But there are words, other answers swirling in my head, refusing to exit. My aunt is getting to know me as a child, her niece, newly arrived from Guyana, her sister's child, who she's had to break the news to that she will not be going back. An awkward lamb, all clingy and needy, not brash and resilient like her own 3 kids had been. A young bird struggling to flutter its own wings, needing so much from her that she was incapable of giving. She stepped right into my room like an obligation. The bed groaned as she patted her palm on the space beside her. I sat, crossed my legs, then uncrossed them, clasped my hands before lifting them to my mouth and biting my nails. We looked at each other, my eye reaching as far as her chin, scared to raise them so as not to seem insolent, like I have big woman rudeness. I opened my mouth to speak and thought about school back home, my old blue bedroom, my best friend Patricia Blake, my 2 little brothers, and all that I had left behind, including my dolls lying neglected in my bed like they were in a coffin. You sure there's not something you want to tell me? Her hand rose and extended as if she intended to pat me, but never made it. Instead, it fluttered back to the bed. It was cold on the playground. You make any friends yet? Now here was the question. How could I tell her I was fresh meat in a mob of meat buyers? That they would prod and poke me, slap my forehead, call me African boo-boo, ugly black shit, and I would escape by traveling back to the pastures behind my house to fly kites with my brother and father. How I would go back to that moment in Easter just before the kite wrapped itself up in the telephone wire. How now I was that trapped kite. I could tell her about traveling back in my thought to our veranda to gaze at the tall sunflowers, yet here I was a pale yellow petal. How could I tell her about burying my head in the books, losing myself in stories to soar like a kite beyond the cuss and stabbing taunts of these kids on the playground? So instead I reply, school here is different, I suppose. Well, it wouldn't be like back home now, would it? But it's school, so you have to study hard now, you hear? And she picks up the pleats in her skirt as I sit biting my fingernails. The space between us on that bed wider than when she stood by the door, and I want so much it hurts, but I smile a reassuring smile, and she gets up, a flurry of pleats, strides to the door, paws in to look back. Briefly our eyes meet, and even that is broken as the door closes. Our introduction. That Sunday began like every other Sunday when all my aunt's children would arrive with their babies. In the kitchen, my aunt peered under the lids and pulled trays out of the oven to dip spoons, test textures for warmth or completeness. I'd stood in that kitchen earlier peeling potatoes and mixing macaroni. My cousins and I had then congregated in the sifting room, the black leather couch full of women talking about men, hair, and music. I sat between my cousin Margaret's feet sulking. No, for the last time, you cannot go and get the book. Ouch, that comb pulled through my hair, hurting my scalp. At that moment, I wanted to shave my hair off. One of my cousins shoved a copy of Essence magazine into my palms. I remembered opening the cover to see dark-skinned women with natural hair in the adverts, beside glossy, relaxed-haired women. Everywhere I looked, there were women who looked like me in the pages of this beauty magazine. And there, on the editorial page, was the silhouette of a woman with a big forehead and natural blades, plaited in straight rows from forehead to back, no fringe holding her head. She was bold, proud. Her name was Susan Taylor, and my life was changed forever. Susan, in addition to being editor-in-chief for Essence magazine, also wrote an editorial column called In the Spirit. And her column spoke directly to this lost lamb on English soil faltering. At that moment, sitting there on the red carpet, bottom sore, the hand combing my tangled bush, the need to get my book, Flowers in the Attic, the begging for a fringe to hide my big ugly forehead, all got dashed away as I read Susan's words. Transition. When did it change? Was it that Sunday when the rain kissed my windows? Or was it when you, Susan, talked about your slow climb up the hill of hurt to get back to beautiful, past that awkward, gangly, long-limbed girl and the big forehead? Or was it when you whispered, Malika, make every obstacle in your life your Bible? Or was it when you whispered like angels song, Malika, you are whole, your bum is not a crater or a hill, it just is what it is? Or was it when I looked up at Michael Jackson's posters lining my walls, his face getting lighter and lighter each picture, his nose straighter? Or was it when I became a wild animal, ripping and ripping the posters off the wall and shouting, enough, enough, at Michael, shouting at myself, shouting at the voices in my head, the voices from the schoolyard, rip, tear, rip, tear? Was it the tear off of blue tack? Was it the 50 pence I used each month to photocopy your In the Spirit article? Was it the yellow highlighter underlining our minds can change the world? Or was it when I underlined positive life affirming thoughts shaped me? Was it the years those words stared at me? Was this when I began mapping myself back to confidence? Was this when I began to reassemble myself? And when I met you, Susan, when I met you years later, I could not speak. My words were low. I said you pulled me from the gutter of self-hate in my teens. I mumbled your name. I mumbled my name, Malika Booker. Our meeting was brief. After your book reading for The Right Thing and you're signing all those lines of black women's books. And 2 years later, I was gathered with a bunch of British black writers in Essence Magazine HQ, and my chest drummed a fast rhythm as we asked for you, and then slowed as they told us, you rarely visit tours. Oh, the delighted ripples of whispers as you walked along a corridor towards us. You paused, elegant, tall, with cane-rolled hair. Malika, you say. I never forget her name. London, The Right Thing reading. We spoke of school. How are you? I never forget her name. Oh, Susan, I can tell you. Your sachet walk and dirt-poor talk grows sunflower petals that sway my glad cloth in the spirit. Oh, dear heart, I'm glad to note we stormed your crowded, anchored, swaying boat in the spirit. You rescued my stunted soul, crayoned cocoa sweet into bitter skin because you wrote in the spirit. That day you said, last columns, dear, folks just broke as essence choke. What? No more in the spirit. Oh, Susan, dear, so sure you know. Black women learned how to cope thanks to quotes from In the Spirit. Now I write like you, Susan. I write so my words can be a reaching piece of sunshine. I write to parent, to instruct, to say, little girl on that playground, in that small room, with veins so bitter, it will change. I write because of you, Susan, to say, yeah, it will change.